Welcome to the Spark Pass News Update. My name is Mark, and I am joined, as always, by Spencer. Spence, how you doing, champ?
Oh, I'm doing all right. It's too hot, Mark. It's
Too
too
hot.
hot, buddy.
It's
Makes me
not too.
sleepy.
It's not too hot here yet, but it will be too hot in like an hour. So, we've anticipated the too hot coming, and unfortunately, Spencer, the only thing that's not hot is the printing press of news coming down for Xbox. As we have, here's the thing, gamers. If this is your first time joining us, we have instituted a hard ban on the Activision Blizzard stuff, right? We have instituted a hard ban on that stuff. You can find that shit anywhere. We're not going to talk about it. Neither of us are legal experts, so frankly, our analysis on that is probably going to be bunk anyway, right? So, because we've instituted a hard ban on Activision Blizzard, and it is a holiday, today is 4th of July, happy 4th for those who celebrate, they didn't post a slate today. They're probably going to post a slate tomorrow. The good news is that we have a Game Pass slate from 2 weeks ago that we haven't covered yet because we were too busy talking about summer game shows. So, we're going to real quickly recap the slate that came out a couple of weeks ago. Obviously, all this stuff is out now, so we're not going to go too in-depth. We're just going to calculate it real quick. Get a sense, get a vibe. We like to know, like, okay, is each upcoming slate good, bad, or indifferent, right? So, we'll take a look at the slate real quick. And then I had an idea, and Spencer, you seemed down with it, of Microsoft recently announced that they're no longer going to be producing first-party games for the Xbox One, which essentially means the Xbox One era is officially over. Let's talk about the Xbox One era, and we'll recap the history of that box. So, first things first, Spencer. We have a slate from a couple weeks ago. This was right after the Xbox Game Showcase. It was like a couple days after, whenever they announced this slate. And we were too busy talking about the Ding Dang Showcase to talk about it. So now, let's talk about it. Here we go. The big one here, the big game of the last 2 weeks, and one that I was super excited to see, only available on Game Pass Ultimate because it's an EA Play game, Need for Speed Unbound came to Cloud Console and PC on June 22nd. This was sort of like a, because I know, Spencer, I'm assuming Need for Speed is not a series you've continued to follow.
I have
recent years.
Not played a Need for Speed game since Blacklist.
That's where a lot of people stopped.
Yeah.
The Black Box era Need for Speed games.
Yeah.
When Black Box was still the one developing it. So the team developing it now is the team that used to develop Burnout.
Okay.
Criterion. They're the team developing it now. And they've had a few sort of missteps, sort of like they're figuring the series out, right? Obviously, I'm kind of embedded in the racing game world as a fan of Forza, right? In fact, I just bought a wheel this week. So yeah, you can say I'm embedded in the racing game world. I would just pick up the wheel, but it's bolted to that table. So, this is, from everything that I have heard, and I have not had a chance to check this game out yet. From everything that I have heard, this is the best effort that Need for Speed has had since that Black Box era.
That's kind of what I've been hearing, too. And this was the first one that, like, because I've seen the other ones that came out get announced and stuff, and I was like, okay, whatever. This one got announced, and I was like, oh, that looks pretty cool. That actually looks interesting for once.
They did a really interesting, like, realistic graphics, but during big moments, they'll do these, like, there's no other way to describe them. These sort of, like, anime pullouts.
Yeah.
Of, like, here's nitrous coming off of your car with, like, this big sort of anime effect. They'll do tire smoke in that effect, too. A bunch of stuff. They do a bunch of stuff. Basically, anytime you do a cool thing, you get that sort of aesthetic effect. Beyond that, I've been told it's the first Need for Speed game in a long time that actually has a story worth playing. It's not spectacular by any stretch of the imagination, from what I've heard, but it's pretty good. There's some issues in the back end of okay, once you're done with the story, that's kind of it, right? But for an enjoyable 20-hour open world racing game, that's what Need for Speed has been basically for a decade, right?
Yeah.
Is these 20-hour-ish open world racing games, and then once you're done with the story, you're done, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's the perfect kind of game for Game Pass. This was a game I wanted to buy for a while, but I didn't want to buy it full price.
Yeah, that was my thing, is I saw it and I was like, I would not pay full price for this.
Yeah, I'm not opposed to this game at all. It's doing some cool stuff, but I will wait for it on a sale, right?
Yeah.
And now I don't have to, right? That's kind of the beautiful thing about most of EA stuff. On occasion, EA will publish something that I'm like, oh, dang, I want to try that. And then on all the occasions that they don't, I can go, it's coming to EA Play in 6 months to a year. Bang. I'll just wait it out. No problem.
Yeah, that's my favorite part, because EA hasn't made anything that made me go, damn, I really got to play that. So I'm happy to wait 6 months to a year for pretty much everything they've put out in a long time.
Right.
So it works out well for me. It's there's nothing that's going to get spoiled that I'm super worried about, and I'm not a huge Battlefield guy where I'm I got to get in on day one and level up and all this shit. I'm if I play it, I play it.
Exactly. Yeah. So, that one is sort of the premier game of the Game Pass library for the past couple of weeks in terms of new stuff, right? Do have a couple of other indies that sound interesting. The Bookwalker, which came to console and PC on June 22nd, a narrative adventure game that I can't speak for the gameplay because I haven't seen the gameplay on this one, but just looking at the art style of it in screenshots, the art style is really cool. It's got this it's not too dissimilar from Cyberpunk's marketing material.
Mm-hmm.
That's sort of red and yellow sort of slashy stuff going on, but it's doing it in more of a fantasy aesthetic, which I think is cool. I can't speak for the gameplay on this one, but aesthetically looks neat. This is the kind of, I actually think this is really important. This is a bit of a side tangent. Game Pass is so loaded with games now. We're talking this service has 300 some odd games at this point. Having a cool looking splash screen is really important at this point.
Yeah, it's at this point it's having the best cover on your book or the best thumbnail on your YouTube video. You gotta have it to yank someone in, right?
Right, exactly. It's almost like back in the day, the attract mode of old arcade machines, right? It's the same thing of you gotta draw my attention in some way, otherwise I'm just going to Halo again, right?
Yeah, I'm just gonna walk right past it.
Right, exactly. So you gotta have that, and this game has that. I would go watch a trailer of this, no problemo, just because, oh, well, hey, yeah, that art looks neat.
Yeah.
It would give me something. So we got a couple other things coming down the pipe. Bramble the Mountain King. Fist formed in Shadow Torch. I love a game that, wants to be something, named something cool, and then comes up with a dumbass acronym. We want to name our game Fist. Okay, great. That sounds awesome. It's a game about a cartoon rabbit that punches people. Cool, you can name your game Fist. Oh, we can't just name the game Fist, though. It has to be called Forged in Shadow Torch.
You totally could have just named it Fist and been Rabbit Punchy. It would have been good enough.
It would have been totally fine, but no, we had to morally justify the fact that we were calling our game Fist.
Yeah.
Fist is a Metroidvania with a rabbit in this sort of they call it diesel punk. It's basically just a greasy, gross, sci-fi aesthetic. But you play a rabbit and it's a Metroidvania game. It seems fine. If you've seen one Metroidvania game on Xbox Game Pass, you've seen a million of them. But, I don't know. Furries Unite. There's a Rabbitman character. I don't know. I'm trying to find the appeal of this game for me. And I'm not quite getting there.
Yeah, I'm definitely not going to get there.
I'm not getting there. It's okay. Bramble the Mountain King.
It's a very, gives me kind of like Inside and Limbo type vibes. Like,
yeah.
you're side-scrolling, and it's kind of like a slower movement in parts.
Right, yeah.
But then there's a little bit more depth in some parts. All I know about this game is apparently it is fucking dark.
Right.
Like,
yeah.
Real dark.
Yeah. It's got this, almost old... I think what they're going for is, these, Nordic fables.
Yeah.
I think is what they're
That's
going for.
That's what it is.
Yeah. I could tell that just from looking at video of it right here, right? I haven't even read the description yet. World inspired by dark Nordic fables. Look at me using my English degree.
Yeah, and from what I understand, when they say dark, they fucking mean it. I saw some people yesterday in a Discord I'm in saying they just finished the game. And spoilers, if you're playing this game or going to play it, it's like dead children type dark shit. And it's like, oh, this is heavy as fuck. And there's a friend of ours in there who had a baby not that long ago. They had their first kid, and they were like, I'm literally not even going to look at that game because I cannot do it now.
Yeah, it's bad. Hard no.
It's bad.
Yeah, so content warning on that there, gamers.
Yeah, it's a heavy one.
Yeah, but I mean, I'm not inherently opposed to that, and
I'm not either.
You tell me, cinematic side-scroller that has a cool look, has a cool vibe, and dark as fuck is not normally my thing, but I'm not inherently opposed to it. That one might be one that I check out. Take a look at that. All right, we got a couple of more, and in fact, a couple of these. One of these came out yesterday, and the other one's coming out tomorrow. So we do still have some timeliness.
Yeah, hell yeah!
It's not too late.
Look at us go.
Look at us go. First one, June 29th. Story of Seasons, Friends of Mineral Town. If you're not familiar with this whole debacle, Story of Seasons is made by the original developers of Harvest Moon. So they had a schism between them and their publisher, where the publisher owns the Harvest Moon name, but the developer owns all of the content of the previous Harvest Moon games. So Harvest Moon Friends of Mineral Town was, I want to say that was it was either the GBA or the GameCube one. I forget which one it was, but it's an old Harvest Moon game that basically that team has been remaking all of the old Harvest Moon games under the name Story of Seasons to be like, it's ours, motherfucker, right? Whereas the publisher now has a new team that's working on new Harvest Moon games. But, it's Harvest Moon. You farm, you meet your wife or husbando, you get married, you have a kiddo, right? You care for a pig. I don't know about you, Spencer, but I occasionally need to care for a pig. His name is Mark. Hi. So I probably get enough of that in my real life. But, I don't know, we historically don't have any issue with farming games. There are a lot of them right now, though.
Yeah, I feel like that's kind of more the thing now, is it's just fucking another one of these things, really?
Yeah.
Oh, Jesus.
Even if it's the OG, right? I think even if you acknowledge that, Harvest Moon is, one of the games that started this whole thing, right? Even acknowledging that is just fucking another one?
Yeah, exactly. That's how I feel about it. I'm like, okay, cool. We've done this 7 billion times. And now everybody has decided to jump in on it after Stardew was huge and Animal Crossing was huge in 2020. And now everyone is like, we could We could make a farming game, right, guys?
We could make a farm. I know how to work a hoe. I know how to.
None of these games exist as competition to us. Let's make a farming game. Yeah,
Let's
like
make.
if you like, I don't mind them, but yeah,
Yeah.
like I agree. Like I'm just kind of like, oh, fuck, another one of these things. Why?
Right? Yeah.
Come on, man.
Like, and all due respect to Harvest Moon as a series is like one of the forebears of this genre, right?
Yeah.
But it's just a lot. It's just a lot of these style of games, and like I feel like there's room for one or two in your life. Right?
Yeah, and I feel like at some point, like, how different is it? Like, I'm sure there's some small mechanics that are different, but like, at what point am I not just playing the same game with a different graphics on it?
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. It's tough because like I want to be like, yeah, Harvest Moon, cool game, right? Like Story Seasons, it's the same developer, whatever, right? Like cool game. I'm glad that's coming to the service, but also just like 84 independent developers kind of stole your lunch here, right?
Yeah. Like even just like the past few game showcases we've watched from everyone, not just Microsoft or like everyone, there were at least like 4 games in there that were either completely farming or had like a giant farming element to it.
Right.
And the aesthetic was always chibi or anime. And I'm like, I don't fucking care anymore.
Right. Yeah. I'm totally picking up what you're putting down there because I feel the exact same way.
Yeah.
Of like, okay, how many cutesy anime farming games can I really fit into my life? And the answer is about 1 sometimes.
Yeah. And that's only for like a week until I get bored.
Right, exactly. Yeah. Okay, I've built my farm and I'm done.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's Story of Seasons. It is cool that like they're remaking all these old games in a modern style in an era where that genre is popular, right?
Yeah,
so,
and
like,
I like their way
cool.
of like giving a middle finger to the publisher and being like, well, I'll fucking do it myself then. Like,
right, exactly. Like this is ours. These are our old games, right? And we're gonna take them and make damn sure you know they're ours, right? By putting this new banner of Story of Seasons on them.
Yeah, I think that's cool.
Yeah, so hopefully that game does well. I just probably won't play it. Last 2 games, Spencer. These are coming out in July. Obviously, we'll probably know the slate for the rest of the front half of July tomorrow, would be my guess. But here's 2 games from July. Console and PC came out yesterday. I actually do want to check this out because I, as I'm sure you were as well, was a child of the arcade. This is Arcade Paradise. Basically, it's Arcade Manager Simulator. You have a family laundromat, and you decide that you're going to turn it into an arcade because it is the 90s and the arcade scene is still booming, right? In the United States. They give you over 35 arcade machines, and I've seen this game played before. It's mostly just like a first-person management sim, essentially.
Yeah.
But you also get to play, like, pastiches of classic arcade games, right? Like, they don't have, like, licensed arcade games, but they have, like, versions of them, essentially, that you can go play. I definitely want to check this out for a laugh, because, like I said, like, I'm a child of the arcade era, right? You know, like, I loved arcades when I was a kid. So, this is one I want to check out just to get that little, like, oh, hell yeah, I'm a child nostalgia, right? Like, I want to check this out a little bit for that reason. What's your vibe on it? Any interest here from you?
Not even a little bit, to be honest.
Okay.
I'm not into the whole simulators and management games. Like, I get where the nostalgia kick for the arcade is, but I'll give you a joke answer and then a real answer. The joke answer is I already have an arcade in my GTA Online profile. I'll just go there. The real answer is I'll just go to the arcade because I really like our arcade in town.
Yeah.
We're very lucky
fair.
to have a super sick actual, like, real life arcade I can go to and play arcade games and drink a beer and eat a soft pretzel.
See, this is the issue for me is like mine is like a 30+ minute drive away.
Yeah, mine is like 10 minutes at most.
Right, yeah. Like I have to make a day of it to go to the arcade and drink and make sure I sober up before I can come home, right? Like
yeah.
Cuz it's over a half-hour drive. God damn it.
You got to pack a bag.
Yeah, I got to like get a hotel room.
Yeah. Make sure you fill up on gas. Get the snacks for the road trip.
So if I want just like a quick hit of that in my house, I have Arcade Paradise, right?
Yeah, you got this.
Yeah, we got this. So we can check this out. I think I watched this.
If this was a game where I could literally just like go into an arcade in first person and walk around and then play arcade games in first person, I'd be a lot more interested than simulation of running a business.
Like I wonder, like, because we've seen a million billion of these, like, here's a compilation of old arcade games, right? And I've seen some of them use like an arcade as like an aesthetic for their menus. But why do none of them just let you just walk around an arcade and like, here's Galaga, right? Yeah. Like go just get the licenses for like Atari's old shit and like Activision's old shit maybe or something, you know, like grab like Capcom. Capcom has their arcade collection that again uses the arcade cabinets as an aesthetic.
Yeah.
Right? That uses them in the menus, but it's just like, oh, okay, it's just a menu, right? You can't like just give me that. Just give me a video game where I can go walk around in an arcade and like there's 3 or 4 old arcade developers, just a bunch of cabinets lying around.
Yeah, exactly. And it looks like this one, maybe there is a little bit more like first person walking around, but I'm just scrolling through the Steam listing, and the very last like promotional GIF that they have is someone trying to plunge a toilet in the business that they run. No, I don't want that. I don't want these things. I want to play a fucking video game.
Hey man, there are some people that get off on that. I'm happy for them.
Stop it.
If you... Hey, I'm not here to tell you...
Just go clog your own toilet and plunge it.
I'm not here to tell you to not like what you like. If you like video games that are simulating real-life tasks, that's cool with me. Live your life, right? Like, I'm not yucking on your yum here. But...
Well, I'll do it. I'm kidding. I'm kidding. Play whatever you want. But yeah, that definitely like was the cherry on top of the I don't want to play this.
Fair. I totally get it. All right, Spencer, last game. This one's coming out tomorrow. So if you want to go, and in fact, whenever this gets published to YouTube and streaming services and whatnot, or streaming services, podcast services, Jesus Christ. Yeah, our podcast is on Netflix, fuckers. Anyway, so last game here. I would
never put our podcast on Netflix.
I fucking would.
I will put our podcast on a place where you can share your password with whoever you want. Fuck Netflix.
Okay. No, see, here's the thing.
We'll put it on
Hulu.
Hulu.
That choosy.
We'll put it on Hulu.
I am not that choosy. Whoever puts the biggest contract in front of me, you get Spark Pass forever. I'm sorry. Like, I am not that choosy.
I will hold us back out of spite for Netflix at this point. I will hold back our show.
Okay.
On principle alone.
I guarantee you, a man in a suit shows up with a contract and puts a number on it, you would sign it. Anyway, last game.
Oh yeah, we have another game.
This has nothing to do with any of this. Sword and Fairy Together Forever. Now, this one really caught my attention. Sword and Fairy is a classic RPG franchise in China. This is not a franchise that's ever come to the States before. I think this is the 7th one. And this is the first one that's come to the United States, which is like not an uncommon thing for RPGs to do, right? Yeah. Like, I immediately springs to my brain is Fire Emblem, which is now a huge franchise. Nintendo didn't bring Fire Emblem to the States until the 7th one, right? So, like, not an uncommon thing for, like, a big RPG franchise to get popular somewhere, and then it comes to the West after a long while. I have never played any of these games, obviously, but I watched a trailer. This was at a PlayStation conference last year. I don't remember exactly. Whatever... They must have done some, like, minor showcase of some form or description. And this was at it. It looks like a neat action RPG with, like, a very cool sort of, like, Chinese mythology theme. If you are into Final Fantasy, it is definitely giving big Final Fantasy energy.
Yeah.
All the way up into this most recent one, the 7th one. Apparently this game started on DOS in the 90s. So this game has some heritage, right? Apparently this series has some heritage. We've just never seen it because it's never come to the West.
Yeah.
Right? So cool that it's happening. This is the first one that's come out since 2015. And again, I know nothing about it. Not on Nathan's Hot Dogs.
Mark, I'm going to have to interrupt you, buddy. I'm watching a trailer for it right now.
Yes.
Did you see the trailer?
Yes.
There's a card mini game in it.
I know.
This is your game.
Listen, I have so many card games in my life. I at some point I have to start getting picky. But this game does have all the classics of the RPG genre. Big scary dragons, cool environments to walk around in, card game minigame. I'm certain there's a fishing minigame in here because god damn it. If you don't have a fishing minigame in your RPG, you're dead to me. Looks like they went the action RPG route with the combat, which I think most RPGs are doing these days, right? Like, I mean, you look at Final Fantasy 16 that just came out, right? Like, it's an action game. It's not a turn-based RPG in the slightest anymore.
Yeah.
Right? It's got like a creature taming system. It looks like it's hitting all the classic JRPG notes. This one just happens to come from China, right? It's following the trends of what JRPGs have sort of become now, which is sort of action RPGs, you know? It looks neat. I'm interested in it, if only because it's a franchise that has some history that I've never played before.
Yeah,
right?
That's kind of the most interesting thing to me.
To me, that has a lot of appeal as somebody who, like, is interested in the history of video games, right? Like, oh, this franchise has been popular in China since 1995 and I've never heard of it, right? Like, that's interesting to me. That's intriguing to me. So, like, I don't know that I'm, like, beating down the doors to go play this, but, like, I'm interested in it. I'm glad it's on Game Pass so that whenever I have some time and some freely available moments to go give it a look, I'll give it a look, you know?
Yeah, I'm more than anything, I'm interested just it being the first time the franchise has made its way here and not been like, oh, I had to import it and all this stuff, right? Like, it's just, there's an official release in the U.S.
Well, I almost wonder if there's even, like, an import scene for Chinese games. Like, obviously, it's a huge thing for Japanese games. I'm sure it exists.
It's probably just not very big.
Right, it's just probably not very
niche.
popular, right?
Yeah.
Right, yeah.
And I think that makes it all the more interesting of, like, okay, well, now we're, like, really giving this a chance, right? So I think that's cool. I think the aesthetic is cool. I don't know that I'm going to play it, though, just because, like, it's an RPG and I don't want to sink a bunch of time into something.
Sure.
But I think it looks cool. I'm excited to see if it does well and, like, what that means for the rest of the franchise, right? Like, are they going to eventually bring the older ones over? Is this just we're picking up here and moving forward? Or is this going to be like, hey, we did it one time, it didn't do great, we're moving on with our lives?
Maybe, I don't know, right? Like, that has kind of been the interesting bit of, you know, a lot of people in our country will sort of doom and gloom on, oh, China's infiltrating the world, right? Not to get political here, a lot of people will doom and gloom on that. But it is interesting to see, like, how Chinese art is beginning to penetrate out here in the West, right?
Yeah.
And this is an example of that, right? Like, I struggle to think of more than a handful of Chinese developers that like have had games that have come out here in the States, right? And apparently this is a franchise that's a deal over there that has never been a deal over here, right?
Yeah.
So I think that's really cool. I'm interested to go check it out. I wanna at least like see what it's about. I'm not committing to playing the whole thing, but I want to check it out. I want to see what the vibe is, right?
Yeah.
So those are the main games that are coming to Game Pass. That's a solid slate. Like, we haven't had like a spectacular, like the last 2 weeks haven't been like, oh shit, we're dropping haymakers, we're dropping bombs, but like new Need for Speed that people have wanted to come to the service for a while, a Harvest Moon remake, and this new franchise. Like, that's like new to us franchise, right? Solid couple of weeks, and then there's some other stuff interspersed in there. Bramble looks kind of cool, you know? Like, I think that's a solid 2-week slate.
Yeah, I feel like out of those, Need for Speed and Bramble are probably the two most interesting to me. But I like that there's some variety here, right? Like, there's a fair bit of games here that are different from each other. So if you don't like one thing, you might like something else, right?
Right. And that's something we always like to preach too, right? Like, we want one big game. I think we've sort of established at this point that like any Game Pass slate that lacks the one big mass appeal AAA game is kind of a failure of a slate.
Yeah.
But diversity is also incredibly important, right? Like, you need a good mix of stuff to come check out.
Yeah.
And I feel like this list provides a pretty solid mix, right? For your mainstream appeal, you've got the cool looking racing game, but also come over here, come with me, and you'll see a world of pure imagination. We're walking into Willy Wonka's chocolate factory here with like a bunch of like here's a wacky Metroidvania game with a rabbit as the pro tag. Hey, you remember Harvest Moon? They made a new one, right?
Yeah.
There's a bunch of wacky stuff in here. Yeah, I don't know. I think this is a pretty good slate. Also worth noting that this is the same month where Elder Scrolls Online is putting out an expansion, Necrom, which is out.
Yeah.
And Halo Infinite is putting out an expansion. Season 4 just came out this past week, right? So, overall, like, you put all that together of, like, two of your bigger service games also have an update. Yeah, that's a pretty good month. I think.
There's a lot going on there, you know? This isn't, there's not nothing at all, for sure.
Right. I know my girlfriend Lizzie has been playing ESO Necrom, and she reports that it is quite good. It's a good expansion, which rad. We played Halo Infinite on our stream on Sunday for the first time since the season update. I think you had played it a little bit before me, but that was my first time checking it out.
No, that was my first time playing it too.
Oh shit! Okay,
I downloaded the update that day.
Okay, sick. Okay, sweet. I thought you had said you had turned it on a little bit. Anyway, that might have been before the season came out. Anyway, overall, my vibe on season 4 is like it's pretty good. Like, it's a good update to the game.
It's a good update. I do hate that there's no cinematic anymore, because this was like the time to kind of close all up the story that they had started, right? And like, even if this had been the last one, but it kind of wrapped up what they had been doing, it would have been like, okay, like, that's a bummer that we won't have them anymore, but at least we wrapped up like one full thing, right?
Right. Yeah, see, that was my disappointment with it too, was like all of the story seasons up to this point had been building up to, right, there's this banished AI that we put in someone's brain to get it the fuck out of a war zone, right?
Yeah.
And we're trying to figure out what this banished AI is all about. And it was all leading up to, that's our new version of Infected, right? Is like the training zone that we're all competing in as Spartans, like, because the whole conceit of the multiplayer is like, we're training the next generation of Spartans, right?
Yeah.
It's the conclusion to that story arc, right? Of like, oh, fuck, all of our brains are infected by Eratus. Ugh! Right? Like, that's the whole thing, right?
Yeah.
It's the conclusion of that story, and it would have been nice just to have the one cutscene of the, I forget his name, but the Min, that's his name. It's amazing what I can remember and what I can't in the year
right?
of our Lord 2023. Of Min, the Spartan that brought that in, finally, we saw him starting to go nuts in last month's cutscene, or in the last season's cutscene. Just finish him going out, just going ham, right? He's in a simulation, Eratus kicks on, and he just fucking annihilates everybody, right? That's all it needed to be. Like, it's not like we needed, like, a super complex thing. Just show the Banished AI doing its thing. That's all you needed to do, right? And do a real quick, like, hey, Spartans, we're fucked. Go kill this AI. Right?
Yeah, exactly. That's all I wanted.
That's all it needed to be. So it's a disappointment that there was no story cutscene for this one. I would totally understand if they did this one and then said, hey, we're done.
Yeah, like, if they were like, look, going forward, this isn't worth the resources we have to put in it, or we're going to have to put resources somewhere else. Like, I get that, but just like, God, you couldn't have just finished this one out?
Just finish the story.
Yeah,
right?
Exactly. You started all this. At least button it up.
Right, exactly. It's super annoying. But in terms of the gameplay that we got, I think the new version of Infection is fun. There's some balancing stuff that probably needs to get figured out.
Yeah.
But I think overall, just in terms of like the ideas presented there, I think it's fun.
Oh, yeah. It's good. And I love the new... what is it? The, like, not the skill, the, like, armor...
The armor ability or
the thing. You know what I'm talking about.
Yeah, the translocator. Yeah.
So they have this thing where you can activate it, essentially, and it gives you, like, a teleportation point. You can run into the map and then teleport back to that other point. So if you run in and you're going to die, you can teleport back out. You can drop it and, like, try to fake somebody out that you're going one way, then come the other. Like, it's pretty cool. It's probably one of my favorite additions to the game so far.
Yeah, it's even cooler than that because once you set the other side of it, Spencer, I figured this out while we were playing some other mode. You can switch back and forth. So, like, as long as that meter up at the top is still not empty, you can go, okay, set up back here, run in, ran into enemies, translocate back to the beginning. Okay, give it a second or two. Oh, I think they backed off, teleport back in.
Oh, right? That's cool.
Yeah, it's really cool.
I didn't realize that. That's even cooler. Yeah. It
so,
got better.
Like, as long as that meter is still going, both of your teleportation spots still exist.
Yeah.
Right? So, like, you can go in, like, set up your teleportation spot, go in, back off, oh, fuck, give it a second or two, and, like, okay, I think they're probably going to be gone now. They're probably going to look away, teleport back in, and get their ass as they're turning away.
Yeah.
Right? Like, there's a lot of cool shit you can do with the translocator. It's sweet. And it's a prominent part of Infection. Basically, the two original Infected have the bubble shield that you can, like, throw on anything. Mm-hmm. I forget the name of the actual shield. Have the shield that you can throw on people to blind them, and that's how you can sort of get your initial kills. And then all the Infected afterward have that translocator device. So, really cool way to, like, infiltrate into, because the kind of the balance problem with Infection is, like, people just want to camp up in one spot.
Yeah.
Right? I think the game mode sort of incentivizes people camping up in one spot, which I don't feel like Infection used to do. Maybe it's always been a problem. But anytime I remember seeing Infection, obviously I didn't play this game mode back in the day, right?
Mm-hmm.
But like seeing the game mode played, I don't remember that being a problem.
I feel like more you would see it more towards the end of the game when it was one person and they were like, all right, well, I got to put my back against a wall.
Right. Yeah. And there's that's fine. I don't necessarily have a problem with that, right?
Yeah. It's more like the whole game ends up being that, and then it feels less like infection chasing people down and more like storm the castle. And you don't have any ranged weapons, and the people that you're storming have exclusively ranged weapons.
Right, yeah. I had several instances when we were playing the other day of like, I am paired up with an AI teammate. We're the two initial infected. We're fucked.
Yeah.
Right? Like, me, never played the game mode before, might as well be a bot at that point. And I'm here with a bot, and we're the two initial infected, and everybody goes to the corner with the minigun, and there's 9 of y'all there, and you just live there.
Yep.
Right? So, it's like, well, okay, well, I guess this is... How the fuck do you break this cycle, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like... Tough, real tough, especially when you don't have like a partner that you can like infiltrate with, right? But anyway, like I said, so maybe some balance stuff that maybe needs to get figured out, but overall I think it's good. I think the ranking system that they added in is cool. I think both of the new maps are solid, right? One of them's an old map from Halo 5, but the other one's new, and I think the forest one's really cool.
Mm-hmm.
Overall, good update. Halo Infinite just keeps on churning along.
Yeah, I'm still digging it. It's still a fun enough game. We were kind of talking about this afterwards, and like part of this is just, life changes and stuff, but part of it's, I think, the game in general. I'm just like, I am far more casually enjoying this than I ever have a Halo game. And I think that's totally fine. Like,
I don't think there's anything wrong with that.
Yeah. I think that's perfectly acceptable.
I have definitely noticed the same thing in myself with Street Fighter 6.
Yeah.
Like, I love Street Fighter 6. I think it's a great game.
Yeah.
Right? Like, it fixes all the problems I had with Street Fighter 5. It is a phenomenal video game. Right? I have no issues with Street Fighter 6 as a game. I'm just not grinding it as hardcore as I used to grind Street Fighter. Like, I'm just not anymore. Yeah. And I feel like you're kind of going through the same thing with Halo Infinite, which is like reaching acceptance with the idea that like, man, we ain't fucking competitive players anymore. We're getting old.
Yeah. Right? I was like, I just don't have time to care enough anymore.
Right, exactly.
I got shit to do.
And that's okay. That's the thing, is like there's nothing wrong with that, right?
Yeah.
Like, just accepting that, like, in terms of the video game genre, we are the old men now, right? Like, we're the old folks that you used to see at the game store when you were a kid, right? Mm-hmm. Like, we're the grown men in our 30s that have time for, like, 3 or 4 new games a year, right? Yeah. Like, that's what we have time for, and we enjoy what we enjoy, right? And that's fine. There's nothing wrong with that. It's just a different part of our lives,
Yep.
I think that's totally okay. All right. Speaking of a time in our lives, Spencer, I want to get here in the back half into what I thought was an interesting news topic. The Xbox One is dead. Not really. They're still supporting it to an extent. But this came out after the summer showcase. And sort of just like, I feel like slid under the radar. I felt like I didn't notice anyone talking about it. Mm-hmm. Xbox Game Studios chief Matt Booty, in an interview with Axios, said, quote, "We've moved on to Gen 9. They are going to continue to maintain support for the Xbox One through Xbox Cloud Gaming. That's how they're going to continue to push forward, which is something they had already been pushing with like Flight Simulator and some of their other next-gen only games. But basically, everything that Microsoft is developing going forward, not going to be on the Xbox One. We're looking at Xbox Series X and S only. I feel like those consoles came out in 2020. I think 3 years of support after your next-gen launch is pretty typical.
Yep.
Like, that's not... That sounds about right. But the Xbox One is officially done. We're no longer getting first-party games. Some third-party stuff will probably still trickle out over the next year or so. But we're moving on from last gen. So I wanted to take a minute to talk about the Xbox One era as a whole, which I feel like is like this 10-year gap is like a really interesting time for Xbox in both terrible and good ways, right? Like, I was not there when the Xbox One launched. Obviously, we all know the story of the E3 fiasco, right? Like, we don't have to go into that. We all know that story. But in case you're not familiar, real quick, they talked about a lot of not video games.
Yeah, they basically were like, hey, the Xbox One, you can hook your cable box up to it. Do you like football? We partnered with the NFL. Do you like Netflix? We have Netflix. Here's some fucking Halo remakes, I guess. Do you want to watch TV? Because we got the box for you. Oh, yeah, the Kinect, it comes with it whether you want it or not, buddy. It's an extra $100. And everybody went, fuck you, Microsoft.
And your system always has to be online, which a lot of people were really...
Do you remember back when these consoles came out and the Kinect was required, essentially, how many times like people would be playing like an NBA game? Like, because there was an NBA game that was like one of the launch titles.
One of the launch games. Yeah, NBA 2K.
And they would get technical fouls for cussing. Like, they would be like, what the fuck? And then their in-game, they would get a technical foul. And I was like, I hate everything about that idea so much, dude.
Yeah, it's pretty terrible. So, Spencer, I was not there for the Xbox One launch. I went, hey, fuck that. Hey, I'm not dealing with all that. And I briefly went back over to Sony with PS4, right? So I was not a part of the early Xbox One generation. You were. You bought that box on launch.
Was this not your Wii U era?
This was
Wii U a little later.
This was the Wii U era, right? Like this was, I bought a Wii U. The Wii
That's
U
where
was
Mark went all in.
yeah. I bought a Wii U and I went all in on the Wii U.
Listen, I still think the Wii U is a cool console.
I think
I hate that it didn't get the support that it should have. I thought it was neat.
Well, here's the thing, right? Is 3/4 of the great games that came out on Nintendo Switch during the Nintendo Switch's life were Wii U games first.
Yeah.
And then everybody goes, oh man, the Switch's library is so great. You literally spent
could have played these years ago.
You literally spent the last 5 years shitting on the Wii U library.
Yeah.
And saying there was no games on it. And then you turn around and the Switch comes out and now the library is great.
Get out of here.
I could go on for 100 years about how fickle the gaming community is. Fickle. I need that Bryan Danielson gif. Fickle. Anyway. You fuckers. Anyway. So I went all in on the Wii U and then my roommate had a PS4. So I was on Nintendo Sony and completely left Microsoft in the dust, even though the Xbox 360 was my console, right? Yeah. Like, I was in love with the Xbox 360. I still think it's one of the best consoles ever made. But you stuck it out. You stuck around in the Xbox One era. Talk to me about those early years. What was sort of like your vibe about the community? What was sort of like interesting to you about those early, like, I'm talking like pre-Game Pass, right? So like pre-2017.
Yeah, this is like way back in the day, right?
So
this was still a time of like, for me, being like hard into like one game at a time, and that was it.
Right.
And obviously there was an attempt at that being the Master Chief Collection. It was a turd on a disc at launch. Like literally unplayable, broken. So it was kind of like, well, I guess we'll try this Titanfall game, because what else am I going to play? Until Destiny came out. And then when Destiny came out, I was just like, well, this is all I'm going to play for the rest of my life.
Right.
And that was kind of where I was at. So it was, I mean, I feel like it's not too dissimilar to most launch console times, right? Of just like, all right, the new one's out. Here's like 4 games that you can play on it. I hope you enjoy those for a long time.
Right.
Because we're not going to have anything mind-blowing for a little bit longer still. And then there's obviously, like, you know, the fucking Maddens that come out every year. And it's like, well, I don't give a shit about buying this.
Right.
I will say, too, that this was, if I'm remembering correctly, when the most upsetting Kinect game came out for me. I had some friends and I that were, like, unironically super into Dance Central for a while. Like, that game was our jam. We would just play it for a few hours, and then we would, like, all pop down to play, like, Halo or something.
Right.
And the ones that came out on the 360 were, like, chef kiss top tier amazing video games. And then the only one they ever put out for the Xbox One Kinect was a piece of crap. I was like, well,
yeah.
This ruined the entire reason to have this stupid ass camera attached to my Xbox. And then I don't think I ever played anything on my Kinect again. The only time it came in handy is when it wouldn't sign me in one day, and I said, "I'm right fucking here, you dickhead," and then it signed me in. It's like,
that's awesome.
It doesn't recognize my face, but it recognizes whenever I curse at it.
Right, exactly. Yeah. Dude, the pack-in of the Kinect, I understand why they did it, because the Wii U fad was still ongoing, or the Wii fad was still ongoing when the Xbox One would have been developed, right? I understand why they did it, but in hindsight, like, wow, way to add an extra $100 to your console for something that nobody really wanted, you know?
The only way that this would have worked is if they would have been like, it's just included. And they just, you know, they would have just had to take a wash on the money for it. But then they would have needed to, like, triple down on making games for it. That would have also probably been garbage and nobody wanted. And then it's like, well, we got nothing out of this. So it would have been better to just not have it at all and have it be an optional thing.
Yeah, we continue to monopolize Rare for the rest of our natural-born lives on bad Kinect games, because that's what Rare was doing at the beginning of this generation.
Yeah.
They were making Kinect games.
Yeah.
Right? Like, that's all they were doing. Their entire studio. Rare, like, the legendary developers of all these fucking great franchises, was making Kinect games.
Yeah.
I feel like that says a lot about where we were at the beginning of the Xbox One era. It's not like there weren't highlights. There were a handful of cool games that came out in this time. As a fighting game fan, I, of course, have to shout out Killer Instinct. Killer Instinct was a game that had a long tail. They did, I think, 3 formal seasons, and then sort of an informal 4th season, right? Where it wasn't, like, sold as a season bundle, but it was like, oh, there's balance updates and new characters. That's a new season to me, right?
Yeah.
They did sort of an informal 4th, and then Iron Galaxy as a developer moved on. Even that one was tumultuous, though. That game was originally developed by Double Helix, the first season was, and then Double Helix got bought by Amazon, and Microsoft had to scramble and figure out a new studio to continue development on Killer Instinct, because they wanted to keep it going.
Yeah.
They eventually tabbed Iron Galaxy to do that job. Like you said, fucking Master Chief Collection is a mess. On launch.
There were other cool games that did launch around that time. But like I said, it was just like not a point where I was playing other games. Like I was just like still very, very sucked into like almost exclusively shooters. Right. And then like started to branch out a little bit later into other things. And even then those were like branching into horror stuff, which was already something I was kind of into through film. But like Rise, Son of Rome came out. It was a launch title. Sunset Overdrive, the game's fucking awesome.
Yeah. Quantum Break is another one that's really... I feel like this is sort of... I call the early Xbox One era, Microsoft's era of failure and then experimentation.
Yeah.
Right? Like, the initial launch, aside from Killer Instinct, is an unmitigated disaster, right? I don't think you can call it anything other than that. It has this device that nobody wants attached to it. Always online was a concept that was too soon. Obviously, all of our shit has to be always online now, but a decade ago, that was a harsh concept for people.
Mm-hmm.
So a little too early on that.
Even now, I don't like it, to be honest with you.
I mean, here's the thing. It's not going anywhere.
Oh, so, yeah, like, no, I get it. I just hate the idea of it.
In 2023, we've accepted it. In 2013, it was still a new idea, right?
Yeah, and I feel like now it's like, there wasn't a big announcement about it. Like, I think that's where Microsoft really fucked up, is that they were like, we'll always be online. You have to be online. And when this was announced, I still lived at my parents' house, who up until last year had DSL internet at a maximum of 2 megabits per second.
Yep.
Their internet was literally unusable by this time for anything other than like checking your email. So for me, when they announced that, I was like, if I still live here when this console comes out, I can't buy it because I can't use it. It is just not something I could use at that time. And I think if they had just been like, it's just kind of part of it now, you know? And that's kind of what's happened. It's just like, it's just kind of part of the world, you know? It wouldn't have been as detrimental.
Yeah. I think online access is a lot more widespread now. There's still work to do, obviously, in the United States, but it's more widespread now in 2023 than it was in 2013 to where you can at least plug the thing in and like fulfill the minimum requirement, right? And then you're done, right? Because I think it's like, I think if your Xbox console is disconnected for 7 days, I think you no longer have access to Game Pass games. You can connect your Xbox console to something once a week, right?
Yeah.
Like it's a different era, right? It's a different time. Internet access is a lot more widespread than it was a decade ago, and next decade it will be even more widespread than that, right? So it was an idea that, like, it was sort of felt like an inevitability, but it was probably a decade too early, right?
Yeah.
So they had that initial like disaster of a first couple years.
It's just so bad.
It's so bad. Phil Spencer comes in, and then they start doing this like couple years of like experimentation with new IP, which I feel like is a really interesting time for Xbox because like Xbox's identity up to this point is like we're the shooter bro console, right? Like that's their identity at this point, right? And when that core fan base abandons them for the PlayStation after all the always online shit and the launch of Halo's a disaster and all this other stuff, right?
This is also around the time when Sony and PlayStation took over the marketing rights to Call of Duty and was like peak time, I feel like, for Call of Duty esports.
Right,
So everyone who was a Call of Duty fan was like, well, I'll follow wherever the esport is. And that's where we're going to get maps early. That's where we're going to get year-long exclusives to entire game modes and shit, which, like, we're not going into that part right now. But that was where, like, all the shooter bros were like, well, I got to go there. That's my only option.
The whole fighting game community did the exact same thing the second Street Fighter V was announced as a PS4 exclusive.
Yeah.
The exact same. It was PS4 and PC only. And we all knew that, like, okay, we're a grassroots community. We're not going to build $1,000 PCs to bring to each individual event.
Right.
And we're going to need 1 billion setups, right? Like, we're a grassroots community. That's not going to happen.
Yeah.
It's going to be on PlayStation.
Yeah.
Right? So we're locked in. Where Street Fighter goes, the community goes, right? So that happens for a handful of genres. The launch of the Xbox One is an unmitigated disaster. Then they go in this really interesting mode of experimentation for a few years with new IP. This, I think, is when Sunset Overdrive comes out, is around that time.
Mm-hmm.
Recore comes out around that time. Quantum Break comes out, I think, sort of around that time. They're really experimenting with new IP and, like, trying to find their identity. I think the first State of Decay comes out around this time, too. They have this sort of, like, experimentation period where they're like, okay, what is Xbox in the modern day? What are we now? Right? Like, the shooter squad has left us. What are we now? And they go through this interesting experimental phase, and then Game Pass happens. And that's around the time I hopped back on, because I thought Game Pass was a really interesting idea, right? So I hopped back on, like, 2017, 2018, around sort of the nexus of Game Pass. And before Game Pass even, it was Play Anywhere, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like, that was the initial thing that, like, grabbed my attention, was like, oh, cool, they announced Gears of War 4, and if you buy it on Xbox, you can also have it on PC? That's cool. I just bought a gaming PC. That's neat, right? So I can sort of have it for both. So that was sort of my initial impetus to, like, want to buy an Xbox One eventually, and then when Game Pass happens, it's like, oh, okay, cool. It's cross-compatible with everything, and that sort of, like, cross-pollination of PC and Xbox has sort of become the ethos of the whole brand now, you know? Like, that's sort of, like, from where we were a decade ago of, like, this is an exclusive box that you play your shooters on, to now, it's basically cross-pollinated entirely with the PC gaming market, right? Like, where the idea is, this is a gaming PC that you can put in your living room, right? Like, it's essentially what the idea is, and all your saves and all your games and everything goes across both, so that, you know, you don't have to, like, switch back and forth between the two or carry data over or any of that jazz. Like, it all just works. Right? And they've really, obviously we see now, coming out of the last showcase, they're focusing on RPGs. That's what they've decided the new identity of Xbox is, which is these first-person RPGs that are very much a PC thing, right? Like, these games started on the PC, right? Obviously, they've been on consoles. They've been on Xbox in the past, but, like, this genre sort of originates from PC, right? So, Xbox is sort of, like, now, in 2023, a decade removed from the Xbox One, have completely forged a brand new identity that is so separate from where Microsoft was a decade ago. Of, like, they are still trying to find themselves, right? In 2013, they were a brand in chaos, right? And that's not to say there's zero chaos in 2023.
Yeah, like, nothing's perfect by any means.
Right.
Never will be. That's how it is.
I feel like if you ask somebody in 2013, 2014, 2015, like, why does the Xbox exist? I think if you ask them that question in those years, 2013 to 2015, they'd say, I don't fucking know. Because whatever identity it had as, like, the console for shooters or whatever was gone. Right? I think now, if you ask somebody that question in 2023, I think you'll still get some pushback of, like, there's no reason for it to exist because everything's just a PC now anyway, and you should just get a PC. I think that's, like, the argument against
there's
Xbox.
no reason for it to exist. Just go buy a $2,000 PC, you dingus.
Right, exactly.
That's the argument that always kills me. Like,
I
get it. I understand your thought process of, well, I mean, it's all on PC anyway, but, like, significantly cheaper, and 99% of the time the Xbox just works. There's not driver troubleshooting and all this shit like there is on PC. So
exactly.
I think there's still absolutely a place for it.
There's a place for it. It has an identity. It's a place you can come into PC-like gaming at a budget price point, and they now offer a wide variety of games. There's a little something for everybody now in the Xbox stable, as opposed to a decade ago, it was shooters.
Yeah, it was like shooters, and then there would be
racing games,
games, sports games.
Yeah.
And then there would be, like, the licensed film games, like Toy Story and Cars and stuff like that. That, like,
big launch game for the Xbox 360 was Peter Jackson's King Kong. I remember that. Yeah, like, that was a big launch game.
Yeah, so it was like there were other things. They didn't only make those, right? But their focus was very much on online competitive shooters.
And now they have this much more, I think, anyway, especially with Game Pass, which encourages sort of a broad look at the world of video games, right?
Mm-hmm.
They now have this very broad focus that is like, we're making a little something for everybody.
Yeah.
And I think that is just a better way to go all the way around. They'll still always have that core of like, we always talk about the core of Halo, Forza, Gears, right? They'll still have that. Obviously, some of that has sort of gone into flux. Forza still is rock solid as ever, right? But Halo's been in flux for a while, and Gears is sort of MIA at the moment. But they'll still always sort of have that initial core that they built the brand on. But now they look a lot wider. Now they look sort of more overall at the scope of the gaming world, and they do that through Game Pass by doing what we just did today, which was going through that list going, oh, I've never heard of that before, but that looks cool.
Mm-hmm.
I'll give it a shot, right? I feel like the Xbox brand now encourages experimentation. It encourages looking at a bunch of different games that you normally wouldn't play and going, I think I'll try that, right? And it encourages you to like try as many different styles of games as possible on whatever device you want, right? To me, Xbox is the brand of choice. I can choose how I want to experience all of these things.
Yeah.
Whereas in 2013, a decade ago, in the Xbox One era, they were the opposite of that. Like, they were locked in on one thing. You cannot choose to buy a used game at GameStop because you have to have the DRM for the disc, and it's always online. And, like,
fucking forgot about that one, too. Like, even just outside of the always online, the brief moment where there was, like, no used games again, or you'll have to, like, buy a pass for it was such a terrible idea.
Yeah, they backed off on that one, but, like, the fact that the idea was even out there ran a lot of people off.
Yep.
So, yeah, like, they, it feels to me almost like Microsoft needed to lose its way in the Xbox One era to find what it became in the late Xbox One era.
Mm-hmm.
And I feel like the late Xbox One era is, like, pretty good. Yeah. Like, we're talking about, this is like the time where Sea of Thieves comes out. People have their quibbles with Halo 5, but Halo 5's multiplayer is fantastic. I don't think anyone can really dispute that. The Forza Horizon games reach a whole new zenith in the late Xbox One era. We're talking about Gears 5, which I think is a fantastic video game still to this day. The late Xbox One era, with the insertion of Play Anywhere and then later Game Pass, it's like a different console. Like, there's a vibrancy to that version of the Xbox One in the back half of the era that has carried into the Series X and S era of, like, we get some of that, then it stops. We get some of that, then it stops, right? Like, if Xbox could nail it consistently, we'd be talking about a world beater, right? Yeah. But, I feel like the vision is there, and that vision started in the late Xbox One era. So, like, now that the Xbox One is done, we're not putting out new games for it anymore. Spencer, where do you live on, like, when you think back to the Xbox One, we have this sort of initial period of disaster and rebuilding, and then the second period of, like, the new vision emerging. What's sort of your overall vibe on that console that was in your life for basically a decade?
I feel like it just had a really, really rough start because of some really, really stupid decisions. And then they saw how stupid those were and eventually worked their way out of them. And I think, a couple years later after it came out and kind of found its footing, I enjoyed it. I played a lot of it. That was probably some of the most video game time that I've had in, like, ever, was playing the Xbox One. So yeah, I had a great time with it. Freaking amazing console. It makes sense that it's coming to an end. It's kind of like one of those bummer things of like, oh yeah, that's going to be in the past now, but we're moving on to bigger and better things, so it's okay. It's worth it.
Similar vibe to you of like, yeah, those first couple of years are a mess, right? But I hopped on the bandwagon in like 2017, 2018, and like I had a fantastic time with my Xbox One S. Right? Like I played a ton of great games on it. I discovered a bunch of games that like I wouldn't have played otherwise. And I feel like when I think about the Xbox One, for me, it's broadening my scope as a gamer, right? Like, because I was very locked into, like, I have these handful of genres that I play, and that's all I play, right? That's it. I play fighting games, I play platformers, I play racing games, that's it. That's all I do, right? And I feel like in the back half of the Xbox One era, because Xbox was in such a phase of experimentation, I experimented too.
Yeah.
Right? I was willing to try stuff that I otherwise wouldn't try. And now, you know, that extends and continues into the early Xbox Series era. I feel like I'm a much more broad, well-rounded enjoyer of video games as an art form, right? And a lot of that was because, hey, Microsoft doesn't really know what they're doing, so we're just throwing a bunch of shit out here, right? Like,
yeah, that kind of was what it was, right? They were just like, let's throw stuff at the wall and see what sticks, man.
Right, and I think they eventually sort of realized that like RPGs are sticking, so we're gonna go with that, right?
Yeah.
I think that's sort of the eventual realization that they made. But yeah, that's when my brain goes to the Xbox One era. I will go, Killer Instinct was great, and they tried a bunch of really interesting stuff, and I feel like I opened my mind up to a lot of that interesting stuff, right?
Yeah.
I think that's where my brain goes whenever I think of the old Xbox One. It's still sitting in this house somewhere. I haven't had it hooked up in a little while, but oh, yep, there it is, right there in that closet over there. Yeah, I was looking for it in my room. I'm like, I know it's in here somewhere.
Yeah. I think mine might be downstairs.
Yeah. I was about to say I might hook it up, but like, let's be real, there's no reason to.
Yeah, just play it on your Series X. That seems easier.
Yeah, I say we can just everything plays on the Series X. Anyway.
That one is now a decoration.
Yes, but it put in a good effort in the back half of that generation, and it set the groundwork for what I think so far has been a pretty good generation for Microsoft if they could just get the consistency down. I think the highs have been really high, the lows have been low. If they can get the consistency down, we gonna be A-okay over here in Xbox land.
Yep.
All right, everybody. So there's our little recap of the Xbox One is dead. How do you feel? Where's your brain? We should have a new slate out tomorrow, so hit us up on Twitter if you're allowed to read Twitter posts anymore. At SparkPass. Where hopefully we'll share the new slate. We're expecting the new slate to come down tomorrow. Normally we expect it on Tuesdays, but it's a holiday, so probably just got delayed by a day for that reason.
Yeah.
So hopefully we have a new Game Pass slate out tomorrow, and I will be capital P posting all about it. So you can catch up with the next slate of games that's coming out for the first half of July there. We might do a brief recap on the next news show. Other than that, next week we have a new episode. Last Case of Benedict Fox, our main show for the Game Pass Game of the Month Club. Super excited to talk about Benedict Fox. I think it's a really interesting game. I think there's a lot we can probably get into. Spencer, you have anything you want to plug before we get on out of here?
I don't think so. I think that's it.
That's all. That's it. Now Spencer's gonna go fuck with his 3D printer, and I'm gonna go write my Starfinder campaign. We're gonna go to do our other thing.
Yep, I'm gonna go lay on the couch for a little while since it's a holiday.
Hell yeah!
I'm gonna go do nothing for once in my fucking life.
Go enjoy doing nothing for the day, everybody. I mean, I won't get to. I have to work. The news never stops. But everybody go enjoy your holiday. Happy 4th of July. And we will catch you all next week for Benedict Fox. Take care, everybody.